Good morning, and welcome to People's Church. No matter who you are, where you're from, who you love, what you believe or don't believe, you are welcome here. Thank you for joining us this Sunday morning for worship. Today, we are once again online due to the ongoing health concerns related to the coronavirus pandemic. And for those of us who are joining through Zoom today, I have a friendly reminder that if your camera is on during worship, we can see everything that you do. I love seeing the PJs and the coffee, but please do be aware that all your movements and all of your activities are visible. So be mindful of that, and feel free to turn off your camera if you'd like to just relax, and that would be more comfortable for you. Our service today is going to be about systemic racism and current events. We will be blessed with the music from Angie Pierce Jennings and Judy Michelin on piano, readings delivered by Jim Federer, a children's message from the First Universalist Church of Minneapolis, and the technical support of David Wise. In my sermon later, I will be speaking specifically to white people. If you're a person of color, feel free to sit this one out. Spend time engaged in an alternative spiritual practice. If you are the parent of young children, please know in advance I will be direct and be prepared to discuss systemic racism and policing with your children. If you're looking for support around this, David and I are here to help. There are lots of books and resources available that we would love to recommend. At the end of the service today, we will have breakout rooms available. So please stay and chat with others in your breakout room, just as you would downstairs in the Andre room for coffee hour. And now, let our worship begin with a prelude from Angie Pierce Jennings.
Come gather round, people, wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown, and accept it that soon you'll be drenched to the bone. If your time to you is worth saving, then you better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone, for the times they are a-changing. Come writers and critics who prophesize with your pen, you keep your eyes wide, the chance won't come again. And don't speak too soon, for the wheel's still in spin. There's no telling who that it's naming. The loser now will be later to win, for the times they are a-changing. Senators, come on, Congress, please heed the call. Don't stand in the doorway, don't block up the hall, for ways that get turned will be ways that have stalled. There's a battle outside and it's raging. It'll soon shake your windows and rattle your walls, for the times they are a-changing. Come on, forefathers throughout this land, you don't criticize what you can't understand. Us sons and us daughters are beyond command. Your old road is rapidly aging. Please step out of the new one if you cannot lend your hand, for the times they are a-changing. The times they are a-changing. The line it is drawn and the curse it is cast. The slow one now will later be fast, as the present now will later be past. The order is rapidly fading. Oh, the first one now might later be last, for the times they are a-changing. Oh, the times they are a-changing. The times they are a-changing.
Our opening words this morning are from the Movement for Black Lives. The Movement for Black Lives formed in December of 2014 and was created under the fundamental idea that we can achieve more together than we can separately. Here is their call to action. The time for action is now. People are taking to the streets, flooding social media, calling local officials, and demanding justice for those who have been killed by the police all over the country, and now is the time to join them. With all actions, there are a variety of risks and roles. All roles are important, and this moment is no different. In the last 3 months, more than 100,000 people in the United States have died of COVID-19, and Black people are dying disproportionately. As we move into collective and community action, we have to learn the risks involved and how to keep ourselves and our communities safe. There is no right way to take action. Do what you can from where you can. Power building takes many shapes. Thank you for joining us. Our opening hymn is Be That Guide, and I invite you to sing along from your homes. Do you hear? Oh, sorry. We're going to try that again. Because I was on the wrong tune. All right. Be the guide whom love sustains, rise above the daily strife, lift on high the good you find, help to heal the hurts of life. Be that helper loving dawns, don't a friend nor taunt a foe, ever strive for liberty, show the path that life should go. We that build a trusting good, bitter though the test may be, through all ages they are right, though they build in agony. We that teach our faith directs, move beyond the old frontier, though the fright and fear that faith be tomorrow's pioneer. Our chalice lighting is Compassion by Suzelle Lynch. As Jim lights the flame, I invite you to say the words along with me. Compassion is born in knowing how connected we all are. The healing and comfort we experience in being together is wonderful, but compassion is more than comfort. Because when we feel connected, we also feel responsible. We know our destiny is bound up with the destinies of others. We light this chalice for compassion, the connection that drives us to take action and work with love for justice. We'll continue now with our affirmation. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. We have a responsive reading this morning that we're going to do by following along on the screen. It is We Bring Our Hearts. I will play the leader role, and the people will respond where it says people. And David, if you want to read them along with me, that would be great. All right, we bring our hearts. Today we bring our beating hearts.
We bring them as they are.
We bring them to community where we are held accountable. We bring our hearts to be witnessed.
We grieve. Will the tears ever end?
Angry.
We demand justice.
We will not be delayed.
We will not be denied.
We bring hearts that sometimes waver and are sometimes overwhelmed by waves of despair.
We weep and wonder, how long?
How long will Black people be murdered by police?
What is our role in stopping the devastation of Black lives?
We will do the next right thing.
We will rise. We will go beyond the status quo.
We demand an end to murder and abuse by police.
We will take part in building a pro-Black present and a pro-Black future.
We will be pro-Black.
We will be pro-Black.
Not just in our words.
Not just in our protest signs.
Pro-Black in our actions.
Pro-Black in our policies.
Pro-Black in our welcome.
Pro-Black in our conversation.
Pro-Black in our worship.
Pro-Black in our fellowship.
Because Black lives matter.
Black lives matter.
Black lives matter. The director of religious education at the First Universalist Church of Minneapolis shared a message for their congregation's children a few weeks ago after the death of George Floyd, and she has given us permission to share her children's moment now. And so we have a recording of that conversation. Her name is Lauren Wythe, and we are going to listen to her children's message.
Good morning. I'm Lauren Wyeth, and I want to talk to our kids this morning about what's happening here in Minneapolis. As Unitarian Universalists, we promise to speak the truth in love. And sometimes the truth we have to speak about is very sad or very complicated or scary or unfair. But we speak the truth in love anyway, because the truth will set us free. We are talking this morning about George Floyd. George was a 46-year-old Black man who lived in our city. His friends called him Big Floyd because he was 6.5 feet tall, really tall. And when George was a boy, he liked playing football and basketball. All through his life, George tried to help others by being a good and generous friend and by accepting others just as they were. On Monday, George Floyd was killed by a white police officer in South Minneapolis. The police officer was arresting George because he thought that George had used fake money in a store. George was made to lie on the ground, face down, with handcuffs. And then the police officer knelt down and put his knee on George's neck. And George told the police that he couldn't breathe. Some people who were nearby tried to get the police officer to stop hurting him, but the other police officers who were there, they didn't help. Even worse, they prevented anyone else from helping. And the police officer who was pressing his knee into George's neck, he didn't stop, and George Floyd died. Why would the police do this? In our country, so many Black people have been killed by police officers. We're taught that police are supposed to help and protect everyone, but Black people have always been treated unfairly by police. They're more likely to be accused of things they didn't do and more likely to be hurt. This is really scary because police officers have a lot of power and responsibility. Though we should all be able to count on them to be kind and helpful, many Black people feel scared when they're around. Black leaders in our community are calling for an end to policing. They want money to be given to Black communities directly so that people can choose how they will take care of one another. Now, here in the Twin Cities, in this past week, you may have seen broken glass and smoke and heard sirens and loud bangs and helicopters around your neighborhood. You may have seen some beautiful art, like this mural. And I know you've seen lots of people helping one another too. Our neighborhoods are hurting. We are full of so many feelings about George's death, including deep sadness and fear and rage. Ever since George died, lots of people have been protesting what happened. We carry signs and we demand that the police officers who murdered George Floyd be arrested, all 4 of them. But many people think it will take more than that for things to change. We want to live in communities where when someone needs assistance, for any reason, no matter who they are, they can count on trained helpers showing up with kindness and concern. Black community leaders are demanding that the Minneapolis police become a force that cares about and protects everyone equally. They say we might have to start over with a brand new way so that Black people and Indigenous and Brown people too can trust community helpers to help everyone. Now, an important question we have is how can we honor George's life? Well, first we can remember and talk about him like we are now. We might want to find a picture of him and post it somewhere in our home. I chose this beautiful one by Andres Guzman. When we want to create sacred space, we can light a candle for George and for his family and loved ones and for all our communities. We can say a prayer of hope that George's loved ones find comfort and that our communities find justice. God of many names, we know that breath is life. May everyone breathe freely. We feel our connection to the whole human family as we breathe in and breathe out. Amen. And we can also do things to help. We can draw pictures or write messages of love to share with George's family and our neighbors. We can make signs that say justice for George, or we can write Black Lives Matter in chalk on our sidewalks. We can write letters to our mayor and our governor telling them about the kind of communities we want to live in. What happened to George Floyd and what keeps happening to Black communities in our city and our whole country is terrible and wrong. Whenever you have any questions about it, you can speak to us, and we promise to speak the truth in love. Knowing hard things is still easier than having questions that we can't ask or feelings that we can't express. If you're angry, it's okay to stomp around and yell. And if you are sad, crying might help. And kids, if you're feeling scared, I hope you will let your grown-ups know so they can help you feel calmer. And I promise you this. We adults will work as hard as we can to fix these problems by taking care of ourselves, by taking care of you, by keeping our hearts open even when they're broken, by lifting up the voices of our wise Black leaders and listening for what love is asking us to do. We love you so much, and our love for you is why we are so determined to build a better world.
Compassion. As mentioned in our expanded e-weekly email, the UUA is promoting the theme compassion during the entire month of June. Today, our liturgy and homily will dwell on the topic of racial justice and disparity in connection with COVID-19. Both compassion and justice connect together in a very real way. Compassion is an inherent part of a human response to suffering. It is, however, comprised of a three-part experience. First, by noticing another's pain. Secondly, by a deep feeling of sympathy with another. And thirdly, responding in some way. Compassion is therefore not just a matter of niceness and empathy. It is a deeper type of feeling that takes one step further and drives us to action, such as to achieve racial justice, for example. Action is therefore part of the meaning of compassion. In the case of racism and police brutality inflicted on George Floyd, we have and will continue to see responsive action by peaceful demonstrators and a push against evil until more lasting corrective justice is implemented. So let's use the word compassion more often in our daily discussions because it contains all the elements needed for a driving force to achieve racial justice. At the same time, we also know that many of us are not protesting by commingling and marching because we are in a time of a severe pandemic. During this COVID-19 pandemic, suffering and struggles are widespread in many homes, whether from sickness, job loss, loneliness, or stress and worry. Because of social isolation, it's harder than ever for us to extend our compassion and our caring for those who need it. However, there are creative and even sneaky ways to offer our compassion with action to others, to let them know they are not alone. It's called guerrilla compassion and described as follows by the UUA. Imagine leaving unexpected flowers on a neighbor's doorstep. Perhaps hire a neighbor's teenager to mow your lawn. Surprise a neighbor or friend with an act of needed help. Consider sending a random note or a phone call to someone. Donate to a good cause. Are you a photographer? Invite folks on your block to step outside their front door for a family photo with their home. which has now become their world. Maybe organize a car parade that drives by a house and sings happy birthday or happy anniversary or graduation greetings to that person who has been cheated out of a real celebration. All of these can be done while honoring social distancing. It takes some creativity and guerrilla tactics. At People's Church, we are asked to lead compassionate lives through spiritual growth and just action.
We're going to sing again, Do You Hear? Number 112, and the words will be on your screen if you wish to sing along.
Do you hear, oh my friend, in the place where you stand, through the sky, through the land? Do you hear, do you hear, in the heights on the plain, in the vale on the main, in the sun, in the rain? Do you hear, do you hear? Through the roar, through the rush, through the throb, through the crush, do you hear in the hush of your soul, of your soul? Hear the cry, fear won't still, hear the heart's call to will, hear a sigh, startling trill, in your soul, in your soul. From the place where you stand to the outermost strand, do you hear, oh my friend? Do you hear, do you hear? All the dreams, all the dares, all the sighs, all the prayers, they are yours, mine and theirs. Do you hear, do you hear?
A prayer from Victoria Stafford. So much carries on as usual, even now in the pandemic time. Why are we so surprised? Not everything has changed. The greening of the tender land, the spotted fawn, now 12 days old, spindly, graceful, in the reedy grasses. Orioles returning, warmer days, the rain. The murder by police of a human soul in daylight, just like that. Another black man gone from our sight, gone from the embrace of family. I can't breathe, he said, as they killed him on the pavement in the greening spring. Sun shining down, rain raining. I can't breathe, he said to them as they stole the breath. He can't breathe, nor hear the birds, nor greet the sun, nor laugh in rain, nor clasp a hand, give thanks, eat bread, or sing. They killed him on the pavement in the greening spring. Not everything has changed, even now in the pandemic time. Spirit, may there come, may we make, may we bring and be a mighty change. Shake us from our solitary sadness into constant and concerting rage. Shake us from complicit silence and our usual complacency into people that are worthy of the birds, the trees, the spring, the rain, and breath. May we, who are still breathing, be worthy of the breath.
Last week, we began our month-long conversation on compassion by focusing inward, acknowledging that our first task in living a compassionate life is to be compassionate to ourselves. We learned some practices for self-love, including the loving kindness meditation. And as you'll recall, this practice and every other practice we went over involved breathing, breath, ruha. Ruha is the Hebrew word used in the Old Testament for breath. It also refers to spirit, wind, and life itself. Ruha animates all of creation. It is the spirit of life, the source of all, the sacred, flowing through each and every living thing. It is the breath of God. Which is why breathing is so important to spirituality and well-being. Slowing down and breathing deeply and mindfully connects us with the sacred and grounds us in that which is bigger than the self, the spirit, the breath of life. But not everyone in America can breathe. The coronavirus, which impacts the respiratory system, is making its way across America and disproportionately affecting people of color. And just 3 weeks ago, another black man, George Floyd, was murdered in the streets of Minneapolis. The breath of life choked out of him by a Minneapolis police officer who knelt on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. His last words were, "I can't breathe. I can't breathe." Black Americans can't breathe in our society. The unrelenting knee of systemic racism is constantly on their neck. Let's start with coronavirus. African Americans, as I've said, are being infected and dying at much higher rates than whites. According to the COVID Racial Tracker, a joint project of the Anti-Racist Research and Policy Center and the COVID Tracking Project, nationally, African American deaths from COVID-19 are nearly 2 times greater than would be expected based on their share of the population. In 4 states, the rate is 3 or more times greater. I looked up the statistics locally, and here in Iowa, African Americans make up 4% of the population, 11% of coronavirus cases, and 5% of deaths. Nearby in Illinois, African Americans make up 27% of the population, 50% of coronavirus cases, and 47% of deaths. And in Wisconsin, African Americans make up 6% of the population, 21% of the coronavirus cases, and 25% of deaths. So why is this happening? Why is COVID-19 so disproportionately impacting Black Americans? Those of us in the field sadly expected this, says Dr. Marcela Nunez Smith, director of the Equity Research and Innovation Center at Yale School of Medicine. We know that these racial ethnic disparities in COVID-19 are the result of pre-pandemic realities. It's a legacy of structural discrimination that has limited access to health and wealth for people of color, she says. Limited access to health and wealth. Limited access to health includes limited access to health care. Camara Jones, physician and epidemiologist, explains African Americans are twice as likely to lack health insurance compared with their white counterparts, and more likely to live in medically underserved areas where primary care is sparse or expensive. So there's the lack of health insurance, the limited access to care, and then when folks actually do receive medical treatment, The hospital in their neighborhood may not have the necessary supplies or equipment, and on top of all that, folks encounter racial bias, unconscious racial bias from their providers and medical institutions. Their pain is not taken seriously. They're not treated the same way as white people. The healthcare system is failing the Black community all the way around, limiting access to health. Limited access to health also includes a limited access to a healthy environment in which to live. I started to really learn what this means when I was working in Boston at the UU Urban Ministry in Roxbury, Boston's historically Black neighborhood. Walking around the streets of Roxbury, you can see the legacy of environmental racism all around you. There are the toxic waste sites where white business owners used to dump because they didn't have to live there and there were no consequences. There are the remnants of the old bus yard where buses used to idle all day and night, constantly clogging the neighborhood with exhaust fumes and contributing to high rates of asthma in that neighborhood. There are countless reminders of how environmental racism has played out for generations, contributing to the high rates of pre-existing conditions like asthma, obesity, high blood pressure, and diabetes that make one more vulnerable to COVID-19. Environmental racism is a major contributor to coronavirus racial disparities. Jones says, what we need to do is uninvisibilize structural racism and say this structural racism and the historical federal partitioning of our cities into racially segregated neighborhoods, the disproportionate placement of toxic dump sites, the stuff which is giving us more asthma, more lung disease, or the HIV epidemic. These are the old aspects of racism showing up during this pandemic. None of this is new. Racism is a public health crisis and has been for a long time. Yes, coronavirus can impact anyone regardless of race. It has no boundaries, but if anything, this pandemic has made abundantly clear that the most significant pre-existing condition for coronavirus in America is racism. As it turns out, the determining factor in whether or not someone will be a victim of police brutality in America is also racism. Now, as a white person growing up in this country, I was taught from an early age that the police are friendly helpers, always there to protect me. And that has largely been my, albeit limited, experience with police. But for Blacks growing up in America, the lesson is quite different. Avoid the police. If you do interact with them, do whatever they say, no sudden moves, keep your hands visible, explain everything you're doing, stay alive. Learning about this stark difference in how white and Black communities experience policing and admitting the systemic nature of the problem has been a long, difficult process for me. For a long time, my brain didn't want to unlearn the lie that the police are unbiased, friendly helpers. In fact, 5 years ago or so, back in Boston in that historically Black neighborhood of Roxbury, I heard a group of passionate Black teenagers give a very well-informed presentation about the history of policing in America and call for the defunding of police. At the time, I could not hear what they were saying. It just sounded so far out there. The idea that it's not just a few bad apples, but the fact that the whole tree is poisoned went against everything I was taught. So I tuned it out. I conveniently ignored the truth and wrote it off as fringe radicalism. Defunding the police, that's just going too far, I said. I've been thinking a lot about these teenagers lately. I was especially reminded this week of the truth they told me all those years ago when I listened to a podcast called American Police on NPR's Throughline. featuring historian and author Khalil Gibran Muhammad. And all these years later, having had some time to process this information, I was finally able to hear the truth, and I have changed my mind about defunding the police. In the podcast, Khalil Gibran Muhammad explains that policing in America has always been brutal and was born out of a desire for white people to control black lives. In the early days of America, the first police were slave patrols, white citizens who took it upon themselves to violently enforce slave codes and keep black people enslaved. When slavery was abolished in 1865, the 13th Amendment made slavery illegal except as a punishment for a crime. So what did the southern states do? They passed black codes, making sure that just about everything a black person could do would be illegal and thereby keeping them subjugated. As a result, blacks basically couldn't do anything except for work for a white man on the white man's terms. Vigilante groups like the KKK took it upon themselves to ensure this by terrorizing black people. When the 14th and 15th Amendments passed, ensuring more equality for emancipated slaves, Southern states simply adjusted their methods by developing Jim Crow laws. Meanwhile, in the North, as America was experiencing new waves of immigration in the 19th century and northern cities became more and more diverse, modern police forces were cropping up. These police forces largely served to enforce ethnic and racial hierarchies and act as foot soldiers for politicians. As the Great Migration occurred and blacks made their way to northern cities, as we head into the 20th century, these southern and northern policing models blended into something like what we have today. The first officially documented and investigated case of police brutality in America occurred in 1894. As Khalil Gibran Muhammad says, less than 2 generations into modern policing, we have evidence of its fatal flaw. Black people have been persecuted and murdered by the police since the beginning of modern policing because the goal has always been to control black lives and protect whiteness. The death of George Floyd is another example of this horrific truth. In Minneapolis, where Floyd was murdered, the Minneapolis police force, which was founded in 1867. Think about that. 1867, 2 years after emancipation. The Minneapolis police force uses violent force against people of color at the rate of 7 times that of whites. Just 20% of the population of Minneapolis is black, but according to the New York Times, when they get physical with kicks, neck holds, punches, shoves, takedowns, mace, tasers, or other forms of muscle, nearly 60% of that time, the person subject to the force is black. We have a real problem here. Police brutality against black and brown people is baked into the system. It is rooted in systemic racism and has been terrorizing black people and controlling their every move for centuries. The question before us now, says Gibran Muhammad, is do white people in America still want police to protect their interests over the rights and dignities of the lives of black, brown, indigenous, and Asian populations in this country? Do we still want the police to enforce racism? I know a lot of people right now are asking questions about how could you possibly maintain public safety without police? But I invite you to consider this. Who kept George Floyd safe? Is it possible that it's not the police that are keeping you safe right now, but your whiteness? And if you're wondering why this issue has blown up all of a sudden and why people are so outraged in the streets, then you haven't been paying attention. People of color have not had the privilege or the luxury of tuning this issue out. They have been outraged and passionate and active and organizing for decades. I know it's easier to ignore the issue. I've been there very recently. It is much more comfortable to assume people of color are making this up or that it's just a couple of bad apples. Nothing that some good reform can't take care of. Now, I am thrilled that activists in Cedar Rapids are making progress with the City Council right now on police reform. But I fear that reform isn't enough. Miski Noir of the Black Visions Collective in Minneapolis explains that Minneapolis has tried just about every reform people can come up with. It is the poster child of reform. Minneapolis currently has a Black police chief. The Department of Justice under the Obama administration did a full review of the department. Officers now have body cameras. They have received implicit bias training. They have been trained not to put people in chokeholds, and yet Noir says still the police department manages to murder Black people in the streets. So Black organizers and communities of color have been organizing for years, decades, to reduce the scope, scale, and power of the police. Most of us don't know about this work because organizations like the Black Visions Collective, Reclaim the Block, and the Movement for Black Lives don't get as much media attention as they should. But even though we, and again I'm speaking to white people today, even though we and the media haven't been paying attention, the people were organizing. Defunding the police is not a new idea, and it's not an impossible one. Other communities across the country, like Camden, New Jersey, and Eugene, Oregon, have been experimenting with alternatives to police for a while now, implementing more community-led safety efforts. And just this month, during the riots in Minneapolis, the community kept the city alive, organizing community patrols, food drives, ride-sharing, handing out PPE, and so much more. Defunding the police is not impossible, and it does not reduce public safety. It simply invites us to be creative and reimagine what public safety actually looks like for everyone. It requires us to be compassionate. Compassion is the heart's response to suffering. It's more than empathy. Compassion towards another is an action. So now that we're becoming more aware, if we weren't already, of the suffering of our Black siblings due to systemic racism in our healthcare system and in our police model, what shall we do? How can we compassionately act? I can't answer that for you, but whatever you discover is yours to do, the time is now. And it might not be as complicated as you think. In an interview I heard this week, the Reverend Dr. William Barber said that our main job right now is to breathe, and keep going. Ruha cannot be stopped. The breath that was stolen from George Floyd, that's our breath now. The breath that has been stolen from so many Black and brown people throughout the history of this nation, that too is our breath now. We must continue to breathe life back into this world and reimagine a new, better, more just America. What a great opportunity. Beloveds, we have a real chance to change the world right now. Keep breathing, stay grounded, stay healthy, stay open, and let's get to work. The time is now. May this be so. Amen, and blessed be. This time we're going to take up an offering for the church, and you are invited to send in a check if that's your wish. You can give online on our website, or you can give on your phone if you have a smartphone with the Give Plus app. And so at this time, Our offering will be gratefully given and received as Angie once again blesses us with her music.
Please let me be brave. Please let me see my choices clearly. Please let me be brave. Let me see my choices clearly. I wanna be brave. I wanna see my choices clearly. Please let me be brave. Please let me see my choices clearly. I wanna be brave. I wanna see. I wanna be brave. Please let me be brave. Let me see my choices clearly, please. Let me be brave, please. Please let me be brave. Please let me see my choices clearly. I wanna be brave. I wanna see my choices clearly. Please let me be brave. Please let me be brave.
Thank you, Angie, and thank you all for your generous support of People's Church. I want to bring our attention now to our breath as we enter into a moment of prayer and meditation. Breathe with me. Breath is life. Breath is the sacred moving through the universe. As we inhale, let us take in the hope of the ages. As we exhale, let us breathe out peace. Spirit of life, breath of God, we are your hands and feet, your instruments of peace. Blow the winds of change through us and from us. Refresh the spirits of the downtrodden, the weary, the mourning. Ignite the collective imagination of America as we figure out a new way. As we breathe together, let us remember George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Rayshard Brooks, and all of those that I have not named, generations of Black people and brown people who've been victims of race-based violence in this country. As we breathe together and face some deep truths, keep our eyes open and our hearts open. As we celebrate both Juneteenth this week and pride all month long. Rejoice with us in the spirit of survival and the triumph of goodness. Bless us with compassion. Show us what is ours to do. Keep our spirits up, breath. Remind us that the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. Let us breathe in hope. Let us breathe out peace. We'll continue breathing like this for a few more moments. I'm going to light a candle in honor of all those who I mentioned in this prayer who have been victims of violence. And I invite you to light a candle at home with whatever intention is on your heart today. And whatever you do, keep breathing. We're going to sing another time here, We'll Build a Land. We're going to do 3 verses, which you will see on your screen.
We'll build a land where we bind up the broken. We'll build a land where the captives go free, where the oil of gladness dissolves all mourning. Oh, we'll build a promised land that can be. Come, build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace. Where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. We'll build a land where we bring the good tidings to all the afflicted and all those who mourn, and we'll give them garlands instead of ashes. Oh, we'll build a land where peace is born. Come, build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace. Where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. Come, build a land where the mantles of praises resound from spirits once faint and once weak, where like oaks of righteousness stand her people. Oh, come, build the land, my people we seek. Come, build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace. Where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream.
Please help me and Jim extinguish the chalice by saying the words which are on your screen. or maybe you have them memorized by now. We extinguish this chalice flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Our postlude again will be from Angie. We shall be known by Ma Muse.
We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change, alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change, alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love.
I want to leave you this morning with the words of Reverend Dr. William Barber. We cannot try to hurry up and put the screams and the tears and the hurt back in the bottle, just to get back to some normal that was abnormal in the first place. Hear the screams, feel the tears. The very people rejected over and over again are the ones who have shown us the possibility of a more perfect union. They are telling us these wounds are too much. This death is too much. If we listen to America, if we listen, then now is the time for us not to stop mourning, but to mourn and refuse to be comforted, to unite our collective moral power and demand transformative change right now. May you be blessed this week. May you be a voice for change. We will be entering into breakout rooms at this time. So I invite you to stay and chat. And we'll see you next week. Same time, same place, online.